How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your September 2019 horoscope for Aquarius, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. We are starting September off with the Mars conjunction to the Sun in Virgo. Now, Mars is the planet of our action, drive, our intentions, what we're doing. He is a malefic planet, so Mars does bring things like anger and frustrations. But while Mars is in Virgo, it's focusing on the specifics and the tinier little details. While it's conjoining the Sun, Mars is kind of getting purified with, fire, kind of getting a renewable energy. Mars is, kind of being brought into the light of the Sun. So there's this idea where you can feel a little bit more confident and changeable when it comes to where you're directing your energy. Now, the question is, where are you directing your energy, Aquarius? And for most of this horoscope, we're going to be talking about your 8th house. And this Mars conjunction to the Sun is happening in your 8th house. Now, the 8th house is an uncomfortable place to talk about because the 8th house rules things like fear, like debt, other people's money. It's a, real nasty place. And one thing I want to focus on when it comes to the two major themes of the 8th house is, one, other people's money. So this doesn't look like, handling debt or handling other expenses that need to be taken care of. But also, the 8th house is a pretty scary place, so I'm going to be hitting a lot on the idea of fear and the idea of not seeing things around the corner. And this Mars conjunction to the Sun that's happening on the 1st is kind of like being able to pinpoint where you need to direct your action. However, while this is in the 8th house, this is like not only handling debts, handling issues, but where do you need to overcome not only adversity, but aversion to, your own sense of perception with how you view things? Where do you need to get out of your comfort zone and do something you've never done before in order to get out of maybe the situation that you're in? Then on September 3rd, we have Mercury conjoining the Sun in Virgo, and this is a little bit more important because Mercury rules the sign of Virgo. It's its domicile sign where Mercury is, really good at Mercury things. And Mercury is all about our communication, our ideas, how we vocalize our thoughts. And as Mercury's in Virgo and it's crossing all of its T's, dotting all of its I's, lining all the ducks up in a row, as it conjoins the Sun, this is the same idea as it's getting brought into the light, kind of getting cleaned out, purified by fire in a sense. And while this is going on in your 8th house, this is a good time to kind of, like Mars was directing that energy towards this. Now Mercury's directing your mind and your mental attitude and your thoughts around this. But as Mercury's conjoining the Sun, this is kind of like a light bulb moment. This is kind of like, how can we, if you're in debt, how can we work more on it, eliminate more of it? How can we get around the problems and the adversity that we're facing? This is a mutable sign, so this is about changes. This is about, the process of like transmutation in a sense. But what I think is important about this is getting the right idea of where exactly to direct your mental energy and attitude towards. So then, this is the kicker for you guys. On September 4th, September 7th, and September 10th, we're going to have Venus oppose Neptune, Mercury oppose Neptune, and the Sun oppose Neptune. Now, this is all happening in your 8th and 2nd house, and while Venus is in Virgo and in your 8th house, this can be a difficult time because Venus wants to have fun and the 8th house isn't fun. Venus is in her sign of fall where Venus wants to focus on the specifics and beautify them and emphasize them. Venus kind of gets overwhelmed with the specifics and can kind of suffer from that analysis paralysis idea and not have the time to take care of all the tiny details that Venus wants to and kind of just get rushed into the couple things that she put all of her mind into. So while Venus is going through your 8th house, it can deal a little bit with what's going on, what's around the corner, especially when it comes to the idea of your finances, the idea of your debt, because Neptune is the planet of illusion, of fog, of mysticism, and it's in your 2nd house of money, of income, of resources. And as Venus opposes Neptune here, this is getting a clearer idea, a clearer value switch of where your money's at and where your physical resources and tangible items are versus what is owed to other people, what is owned by other people, and how that relationship exists. Now, after Venus opposes Neptune, Mercury opposes Neptune. And this is, I've been hitting on this on all my videos, but Venus is kind of like having a value shift of, you know, valuing something else more than the other. And right now this might be taking care of other people's stuff, other people's problems that also involve you. Also seeing the value in being a little bit more, you know, focused on what are the tiny things you can do to overcome the obstacles that you have. Mercury is the mental shift and the thought process shift, where Mercury can now see a clearer image of what's going on in your 8th house, and as it opposes Neptune, it kind of just pierces through that veil a little bit and sees beyond the fog. And as Mercury opposes Neptune, this is like the mindset of like, now that I've had this value shift, I'm having this mental attitude shift towards where can I focus my energy and my attention on these 8th house topics. And if you guys don't know already, I would definitely get yourself a little bit versed in the 8th house. Then after Venus and Mercury oppose Neptune, then we have the Sun oppose Neptune. And this is where things get a little interesting, because we first have that value shift, then we have that mental shift, and then the Sun, being the luminary, is kind of like seeing that shift play out in practice. But this is the Sun opposed Neptune. This is where the light can, you know, sometimes it's kind of like if you're driving through the fog and you turn on your brights, like all it does is get a little bit worse. So you might find yourself, you know, where you're feeling a little bit more wanting to be specific, wanting to be more accurate. There's still more fog coming up. So this is going to be a good time to really be more have more attention to detail and be more focused on the specifics. Then on September 13th, we have Mercury conjoining Venus in Virgo. And this is kind of like, you know, while Venus is struggling right now in this 8th house area, it can kind of get overwhelmed. Mercury's coming in to save the day, to have things make a little bit more sense, you know, take off the workload a little bit more, do all of the small menial stuff that, you know, Mercury in Virgo likes to do. But Mercury is expressing the, you know, what Venus is wanting to say. And so as Mercury conjoins Venus, this is kind of getting our head and our, you know, our ideas in line with our values, and kind of starting to come up with better ideas, a better understanding, being able to vocalize this in a more clear and concise way of, hey, what do I value right now and what's important right now, and actually have it make sense in your head to where you can start applying more of your actual energy towards this. This is, again, Mercury on top of Venus in your 8th house, so this is a little bit maybe more of a correct, I should say, well, we were talking about Neptune making things really blurry here, so this is definitely a time of a little bit more clarity, a little bit more things making sense, that, you know, snowball effect starting to go down a little bit more. But also on September 13th, we have the full moon in Pisces. And this is in your 2nd house of money, of your money, not other people's, of your resources, what you physically own and have, like that's tangible. And so this full moon's lighting up this axis to where you could see both sides of, you know, what's going on with your income versus what's owed to other people, or where, you know, where you got to take your attention to other people's problems and X, Y, and Z. And while Mercury's conjoining Venus on this full moon, I think that this is going to be a time of, you know, seeing a little bit more of the relationship that you have with your money versus other people's money, as well as focusing on like, hey, what do I have that I can give to other people that may need it? Then on September 14th, the next day, we have Mercury and Venus still conjoining each other, but simultaneously ingressing into Libra. Now, this is going to be a huge sigh of relief for you guys. However, there's a pretty big switch in energy here. We have Mercury going from its home sign to just another sign, and we have Venus going from her sign of fall into her sign of domicile, her ruling sign, where Venus can be the most Venusian Venus she can be. And so while Venus is this planet of love and money and connection and, you know, wanting to build bridges and connect to other people, Venus is going into your 9th house of your belief, of your spirituality, religion, far distance travel, foreign cultures, higher education, publishing. And while Venus goes into this area, I think this is really about finding more value here and expressing more value in your faith, in your practice, in discovering more. And while Mercury also enters Libra, I think that this is really about kind of balancing out where you can, you know, while everything was going through your 8th house, it definitely could have been a struggle to really see around the corner. And as Mercury and Venus go into your 9th house in a Libra, this is that tension easing up. This is, you know, you finally get to the corner and nothing scary was behind it like you thought it was. And as Mercury and Venus transit your 9th house, the thought process and the value that you're focusing on and where you're kind of enjoying yourself more will be in your studies, will be in, you know, thinking about shit, being philosophical, being more, having more faith in your practice. But also on September 14th is when Mars opposes Neptune. And Mars is still in your 8th house. You know, it is combust, meaning it's underneath the beams of the sun, so we can't see it. It's kind of burning up. Mars is already hot and dry, and it severs and it cuts, so it's already kind of, you know, heating up and burning away what's in your 8th house. But as it opposes Neptune, this is Mars being a little bit more dialed in and having a better scope on where exactly it needs to be focused on and what details and what facts matter to what Mars is trying to pursue versus what's just confusing and doesn't make sense. And this goes back to this talk of your 8th house and your 2nd house of your money versus other people's money. And Mars is kind of doing this little show of, hey, you know, this is a little bit confusing, I'm not sure what to do. But as Mars opposes Neptune, this is kind of like, all right, I see what doesn't matter anymore, and I see what is a little bit confusing, but through that I also see what's more important, and I see a little bit more of the facts that are, you know, in my face. And when you have facts and a truth in your face, you have to act upon it. Then on September 18th, Saturn finally stations direct. Now, Saturn's been in your guys' 12th house for quite some time, and it's definitely not an easy, you know, transit to have. But Saturn, the planet of rules, regulations, discipline, authority, boundaries, as it's been retrograde, it's been, you know, handing us more responsibilities and, you know, trials and tribulations. This has been in your 12th house of repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself, you know, the subconscious, isolation, hiding away from people, hidden enemies. And so while Saturn's been right here, it's been maybe a little bit hard to kind of do anything because it's like this feeling of a weight kind of just blocking your headspace, and things are coming up that you might have never have come up before, and you could be finding yourself face to face with a wall. Saturn stationing direct is the time where we take the adversity that we faced while Saturn was retrograde. We've learned those lessons now, and now it's time to import them into practice. And it's not as easy as it sounds, or I should say it's easier said than done. But as Saturn stations, you know, direct, what have you learned about yourself, and where do you need to be more responsible? Where do you need to have more control? You know, have better boundaries, be more, you know, have a better structure for yourself. Because as Saturn stations direct, this is the time to apply it to your life. Then on September 21st is when we're going to have Jupiter squaring Neptune. Now, this transit has been happening for the majority of the year, but this is Jupiter's third and final square to Neptune. Neptune has been creating a fog and a confusion and, you know, kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that in your 2nd house. Jupiter has been in your 11th house, kind of like bringing your expansion to social networks and friends and, you know, groups of people. But as Jupiter finally stations, is now finally direct and is moving forward and squares Neptune, this is kind of like relying more on the faith of opportunity and seeing a bigger picture and having the truth prevail over the not truth, over the lies and the deception. And while this is happening in your 11th house, I think that this is going to be a bigger time to really realize what is possible with the people that you're associated with and what that can create for you, especially in terms of your 2nd house. Then on September 23rd, we have the Sun ingressing into Libra. This is where the Sun is now in your 9th house, and the main luminary and the light is more focused on things like spirituality, growth, far distance travel, foreign cultures, higher education. And I think as we go from the shift from the 8th house of kind of like, you know, you're just dealing with problems into the end of September, we have all this Libra stuff going on. This looks pretty positive, where you can actually start looking at a bigger picture of things and start being a little bit more philosophical and seeing more of what you believe. Then on September 25th, we have Venus squaring Saturn. And I bring this up because, you know, it's a pretty rough transit. But what's interesting is that Saturn's in its domicile, Venus is in its domicile, but Venus is in the superior position to Saturn. And while Venus is in your 9th house and you're finding more value in your faith and you're finding more value in your belief and you're wanting to expand more in that area, Venus being in that superior square to Saturn is going to be bringing up some challenges where it comes down to, you know, what we just talked about with repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself, your subconscious, hidden enemies, things that you may just not have realized that kind of put a stop and a block in your way. With Venus squaring it, that stuff's going to come up, but while Venus is in your 9th house, this is kind of the time to go, hey, I have this value of this belief that I have and I'm wanting to explore more of it. Where are those, you know, blocks that you're stopping yourself with? Like, where does that help you? And I think Venus and Libra is kind of asking you to really look at what's easier. And you don't have to make things hard for yourself. You can choose to make this easy. And while Venus is squaring Saturn, this is kind of like, you know, if if you want to stop having these blockades and these walls that are getting in your way, it's time to actually start valuing, not only yourself, but what your beliefs are, and maybe expanding more on what you do believe and what you value about not only the relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you have with other people, and the relationship you have with faith itself. Then on September 28th, we're going to be ending the month off with the new moon in Libra. And this is really exciting because this is in your 9th house of your belief. It's kind of just fun and exploratory, if that's a word. But anyway, the new moon is when you have both of the luminaries in the same sign, so they're focused on the same idea. It's giving you a chance to reset your intentions and get kind of level-headed with things. And this is going to be squaring Saturn, and I think that this is a big challenge for you guys to be like, what's a better relationship with belief about self, and where can you establish that now so where these walls and these barriers that have been coming up for you recently are no longer obstacles for you guys. And with that being said, that's what I got for you guys this month. So thank you guys so much again for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next month.